So we're in Madrid at Fyuz 2023. I'm here with Yago Tenorio. He is Vodafone Fellow and the company's Network Architecture Director, and of course also Chairman of TIP, the organizer of the show. Yago, great to talk to you again. Thanks so much for joining us as always.
My pleasure to be here with you.
So, Vodafone had a lot to talk about this morning, day one of the show, not just yourself, but also Andrea Donna from Vodafone UK. Just give us the highlights, because there's a lot of people here saying, well, particularly about Open RAN. I know that the show isn't just about Open RAN, but it's a big talking point. A lot of people say, well, Open RAN, why aren't operators doing anything? Well, Vodafone's actually doing quite a lot.
Well, I can't speak for the operators not doing it, but I can certainly speak for Vodafone. So if we go back to this morning, I think that probably the single most important thing is that our deployment in the UK is working really well. So we had this cluster that we are using for providing acceptance, and we just provided acceptance in July, which means that we are now in volume rollout. There are many more news, and we'll get to them. But this is the single most important thing, because if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here talking about Open RAN. So we started deployment in the UK. We had a plan to do 2,500 sites. That's still the plan. The vendors we awarded are still the vendors we are working with. And this cluster, which is in urban areas near Devon, is working really well, to the point that the KPIs, the performance, the service that we are offering to the customer is equal or better, in its majority better, than what we had before with the legacy kit. That is, I think, the best piece of news, is that Open RAN is working well, and is progressing to volume rollout. And that is the basis for everything else. So on top of that, we talked about the trial we're doing in Romania with Orange. That's important also because it's two operators, not just one. So it's not Vodafone doing things, no, it's Vodafone doing RAN sharing with Orange.
Yeah.
And each of us are using the same Open RAN stack in our grid of sites, and we are providing service to our customers in Romania from both set of sites. So it's a grid that is interleaved, right? So that's good, and that was the first 4G call. Big piece of news, 2G is coming to the party as well. So no longer we'll have an overlay with a 2G kind of from a legacy vendor. No, in this stack is Samsung doing the software, is going to put 2G as well, and that will be also rolled out in the UK in time for volume to come. The other piece of news was we're trialing Nokia in Italy, and I mean Nokia's Open RAN in Italy. So last year at Fyuz we said Nokia is doing Open RAN. We've been working with them, and we reached a point on which the kit is actually going into our lab before Christmas and to the field in the first quarter of 2024. And that is Nokia's Open RAN. It's going to be 5G SA, but is a really good start. So we'll put our hands on the kit and we'll see how it works, but it's getting real. The third thing we announced this morning was a collaboration, or an extension of our existing collaboration with Intel, that will have us actually getting physical silicon chipsets with our designs from Intel in testing sample quantities, which is something that we think can accelerate the cycle of innovation tremendously, because you can prototype, you can test, verify, benchmark your selected kind of silicon ideas and algorithms, and then get to the really good ones in mass scale pretty quickly.
Okay, and that's at your R&D center in Malaga, where you've been focusing on silicon for Open RAN deployments for quite a while now.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we opened in January last year. Intel was one of the founding members. We've been looking at architectures, and we're following up to our commitment to develop a position so that the industry has like a neutral player without bias or an agenda, having a well-founded opinion on what's best for Open RAN. All that we've been following up. We expanded our research area to new technologies like silicon photonics. We released some news a couple of weeks ago. But what this will do is to speed up the pace at which you can actually get new algorithms, new technologies, new ideas. It can be ours, it can be co-developed with Intel, it can be third party coming, through our funnel in Malaga. All that actually implemented in silicon. It'll be, yes, in testing sample quantities, but it's still a piece of chipset that is pretty much final otherwise.
Right.
You can then assemble into a prototype and have a complete system that you can then test, verify, demonstrate, and eventually someone will productize.
Okay. Not only that, also you announced an upcoming RFQ.
Yes.
And for the entire Vodafone estate. Can you tell us a little bit more about that and where Open RAN fits into that RFQ?
Absolutely. As I was saying before, the UK performance is really good news, and it's also part of our plan. So when we started back in June 2021, when we awarded the vendors, this was part of a multi-year plan that would have us reaching first rural, of course, with Open RAN, then urban, then dense urban with massive MIMO, eventually volume rollouts, which is where we are now. Now, the plan continues with an RFQ for the rest of Europe. We are actually adding the rest of our footprint to the same RFQ. Why are we doing an RFQ? Well, our current contract for radio expires in March 2025. We've actually been very vocal about this. And we said it at the very beginning. We said we're doing Open RAN because we have this much time. We want to make sure that by the time that we are out with an RFQ, Open RAN stands up in, its both feet and can contend and can be a new option. And that is exactly what's happening. So we're now, 15 months or slightly more, I think 18 months ahead of that cut date. And if you reverse engineer that and the time is going to take you to run an RFQ of this size, which there aren't many this big, is going to be at least 1 year, which means that April 24 is the latest that RFQ will see the light. Now, we've been working for the last, arguably 5 years, if not more, in preparing Open RAN for this moment. And we have it in the UK, but we also have trials in Germany, in Romania, in Italy. So it's mature, it's performing, it's in volume rollout, and it's ready. So we were also very vocal about our intention. It was, I think, 2 years ago when Johan was still in Vodafone, he mentioned in Mobile World Congress, when this RFQ comes, our ambition, our plan is to see at least 30% of our footprint in Europe becoming Open RAN after that RFQ as an outcome. We've been working on that plan month after month and year after year to make it happen. So now this RFQ is approaching, and all we're doing is repeating what we already said before, which is the whole of Europe and the rest of our global footprint is going to be out to tender. And we foresee that if you look into Europe, if you zoom into Europe, 30% at least of our footprint will become Open RAN as a result of this RFQ.
And this, of course, is open to anybody to respond, or is it a limited set of companies? I mean, we heard here today, there was a quote that there's 125 different companies doing different things across the Open RAN ecosystem, but is anybody able to respond to this RFQ?
I would say it's everybody that we are working with already.
Okay.
Because obviously we are preparing.
But this includes the incumbent vendors?
Yes, yeah. It does, absolutely it does. So it's not only, so when you look at Open RAN, you have different layers. So you have the servers, you have the software that goes as an operating system on top, you have the software vendors, then you have the radio vendors. We're not working with 125 people, but we are working with many suppliers, which of course they will all be invited. But as you say, there is something that has changed since we started in 2021 with our RFQ, or since we started in Open RAN in I think it was 2014, the first time we mentioned Open RAN as a term. But more and more suppliers have actually embraced and committed to do Open RAN. They've put Open RAN in their plans. Samsung was, I remember the TIP Summit in Amsterdam was the big news when Samsung committed to do Open RAN, and I think that was 2018, I believe, or 2019. I can't remember.
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID for sure. And that was a big change. But over time, you saw last year was Nokia committing to do Open RAN. And this morning, we heard Frederick himself from Ericsson committing to do Open RAN as well. So it's part of Ericsson's plans now, and they're talking openly about doing Open RAN. And he was saying that the radios, the majority of the radios, all the new radios, but a good part of the legacy radios are software upgradable to Open RAN, which is absolutely great news for the industry and for us as well. So of course they will be invited. Of course their plans are super important to our Open RAN ambition, and of course that will play a role in the RFQ. Now, do I also expect that we'll have some chances to improve their plans as a result of this RFQ? Yeah, we'll do our best. We'll try.
I mean, this is a pretty big opportunity for some companies to win some very sizable business or not win some sizable business, I guess.
Yeah, I think when you look at the bigger picture, it's easy to see, you try to look at it from a supplier perspective. Probably you can do it one by one and you'll appreciate that everybody will have opportunities to win, but also some threats to lose. But that's what makes an RFQ good. It's like when everybody's incentivized to actually win some business, but if they don't play well, they can also lose some business. So I think that's important.
But just to reiterate, the plan here is not to take the entire estate and say, right, everything, the whole of Vodafone's radio access network is going to be Open RAN. This is still it's still going to be a mix, still talking about 30% in Europe, that is going to be the rough approximation of what is going to be Open RAN enabled.
Yeah, so when we said 30% 2 years ago, we were anticipating, factoring in that the industry and the technology would be at the stage at which it is today. As I said before, we had a plan, we've been following the plan, we've been taking Open RAN from rural to urban, from urban to massive MIMO, dense urban, to volume rollout. And as much as we've succeeded, I think we delivered what we hoped that we would deliver. Meaning that when we say 30%, we were anticipating that we would be at this stage. We had our scenario kind of planning on which we had actually also incorporated the possibility that Nokia and Ericsson would do Open RAN. So even that is not necessarily like a difference or a factor that changed our plan. So I think 30% is still a current target. I think it's healthy, I think it's good. Why not 100%? Because I think single RAN can still coexist with Open RAN. Also, you don't necessarily want or may want to swap out and write off kit that can still provide service for the years to come. In some cases, there are kit out there that you can still squeeze for a few more years. So maybe we would just want to keep it. And there's nothing wrong with incumbent architecture. There's nothing wrong with single RAN. It took us to where we are. And it's a really good architecture. It's just that there's a new one coming that's better. And it probably makes sense to introduce that progressively.
Right.
We have absolutely nothing against it.
Okay. All right. So mix and match where appropriate, because at the end of the day, it has to make economic sense to do all of this. Okay. So obviously, we've talked about Open RAN so far, but this event, and this is shown as well in the sessions, it's not just about the radio access network. It's about covers all parts of the network, and that's in the wide area network, but also indoors as well. So there's a lot going on in terms of disaggregated networks, in terms of open interfaces. How much progress has been made, let's say, in the last 3 years in terms of the impact that these new architectures have had, and what kind of impact is it having on the operators that have committed and actually deployed open systems?
Yeah, Open RAN has some kind of silent brothers and sisters, like, indeed. So, the reason why I think the whole industry and ourselves keep going back to Open RAN is because I would say two things. So the wallet share for radio is much bigger than any other of the domains. It's also true that Open RAN just kind of addresses the radio architecture all at once, while the disaggregation of transport, for instance, started with some components where it's easier, but it's not the whole network, it's just the edges, for instance. And then there is a lot of also politics involved in the radio that maybe they are not so present in other areas, and that's also a reason. But the thing is, in all cases, the disaggregation has the same elements, the same set of benefits in terms of optionality in supply chain, commoditized hardware very often, that you can actually play and aggregate volumes from adjacent industries because the compute platform is completely off the shelf, for instance. Optionality in that you can actually play with many more players, like far more than like the traditional ones or the incumbent ones. And the same set of challenges in that you have to do some integration yourself, and you have to like manage to get to work different pieces that before you would buy, from a single supplier, and it just worked. So both the benefits and the challenges are very, very similar. It's true that they are like mini versions of the big Open RAN brother, but the situation with the operators is almost the same. Now, the size of a challenge, in many cases mean that you can approach it in a completely different way, which makes it silent. So you don't need to set up a big team, you don't need maybe so many new skills in terms of quantities.
Right.
And you can even, in some cases, use third-party companies to help you with the integration, and it's much more straightforward, and there is much less login built into the system. In many cases, these are areas where optionality may not necessarily be the main reason, while in radio is, I think, 9 times out of 10 is mentioned as the main reason. So we don't have enough vendors, we need more vendors. In some cases, when you disaggregate transport, for instance, at both sides of the network, in some cases you do have enough vendors. You're doing it for convenience, for volume kind of play and lower the cost, or some cases you are integrating the software into some other platform. Mm-hmm. So there are a different kind of set of reasons, but it's very similar to what we're doing in Open RAN, except smaller.
And definite success points across the board? Are there some areas where you would say, this is a landmark part of the ecosystem where, real gains have been made ahead of others?
In terms of disaggregated network in other places than Open RAN?
Yes.
Yeah. For instance, in transport, you have the cell-side gateway, distributed side gateway, that is progressing really well. So we're talking about commercial deployment in more than one operator. They're happening, maybe not in a generalized kind of fashion, but they are actually happening, and no one talks about it because it's not Open RAN, which is a bit sad. But it's like uneventful, but it's happening, which, by the way, it also proves the point that is the way to go. And in an area without like so much attention, without any politics, and without struggling the supply chain, no one talks about it, but it's happening without drama.
But the gains are very real, aren't they, in terms of scalability, operational?
Yes, absolutely yes. The only issue why they're not getting attention is that the gains are also proportional to the size of the problem. So sometimes they get a bit diluted in the big kind of scheme of disaggregation things and Open RAN, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist. So in a way, they kind of prove the point that disaggregation makes sense and that the model works in a small scale.
Well, Yago, we've still got plenty more time at this event, plenty more conversations to have, and hopefully we'll uncover some more examples of how things are changing and developing and working in the sector. But as ever, thanks very much for joining us and bringing us up to date on Vodafone and on what's going on at TIP as well. So thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you for being here.